Hi gang, Rob here. It is the afternoon of 11 October 2018. Coming to you today with a From the Sharpening Bench video on a pretty neat knife I had never seen one of before until I opened the box of sharpening work that contained it. Can you tell what it is? I bet you can because you read the title. It fooled me for a few minutes. Frankly, I was sort of in the zone sharpening, opened the next box, pulled this out, looked it over, saw what I thought I might do, sharpening it, and I was, 50 or 60 passes in before I saw this engraved name on the blade. They do it so subtly. Let's see if I can come in super tight here and get the light right. There you go. Grayman, USA. And up here on top of the thumb stud, CTS XHP, if you can make that out. Yeah, this is a Grayman knife. Mike and Sue Grayman, maker of hard use folders of the tactical ilk. The Satu, a huge boat anchor of a thing, probably, strung as a fixed blade. And then its baby sister, the Dua, a more usable pattern. Still, both of those knives are a little blocky, a little unrefined, thumb stud in the way, the cutting path. Just, I've never been able to get my taste to wrap around the Dua and the Satu. But this knife is a little different. It's like a Dua that went to college in England, right? Master's degree at Oxford. Look at that handle. Look at that handle. 3D machined and subtly grooved titanium with a very cool checker pattern. It almost looks, when you look at it from 10 feet, it looks like orange peel, but it's a very soft, not harsh checkering. Pretty cool. The blade. Oh, the blade. 3 5/16 inches of beautifully stonewashed CTX XHP. A saber hollow ground. It's like a clip point Skinner kind of profile. Very interesting. Super functional. The handle 4 3/4 inches long, only 580 thousandths thick. Got a black G10 backspacer. Knife fires out with authority, zero blade play, free dropping blade on big old phosphor bronze washers. I do want to share some pictures of the internals of this knife with you before I start talking about the finer details. So we'll look at those now. As you can see with the scales laid out, not sure how they applied the finish on the inside. It almost looks like they were hand sanded on glass for flatness, and my goodness are they flat. You can sort of evidence that by the free dropping action, the perfect centering, and the total absence of blade play. Very, very well done. The washers, as I said, very, very large, approaching an inch in diameter, and super flat. I did lap them. This knife I think was about brand new, and they took very little lapping to get them to clean up and polish. So very good stuff. The pivot I think is 17/4 stainless steel. It's well machined, but I have some issues, and I'll talk about that with you as the video goes on. Nice large stop pin. Well, let's get into this. We'll get into some negatives right now. I love the ambition of this blade. I love the blade shape. I love that it comes to a thin dimension behind the edge. This one's sharpened at 18 degrees per side with a 21 degree micro. Everything good there, but it's almost like they didn't know how to finish their own design in a couple ways. Look at the stop pin. Now remember, we have a 3D machined handle, so that titanium is radiused, so that surface is decreasing as it comes to the spine. Notice that the bottom side of the stop pins are almost flush. But then you look at it from the spine, and oh my gosh, there's doggone near a 1/16 of pin sticking out. Now that pin floats, it's not restrained, so they would have had really two choices there to clean that up. Either make the holes blind, with the pin just fractionally shorter than the distance between the bottoms of the two holes, or they could have made it D-shaped and tried to radius the pin with the scale. In its present form, I'm not saying it causes a problem, it just doesn't really look finished. And that same thing kind of carries on to the pivot. The pivot appears to have been on both sides finished in the handle. But if you notice, this has been apart and back together, and I didn't get the satin on that pivot going exactly in the same direction as perpendicular to the handle. And frankly, it almost looks like the edges of the pin and the edges of the hole, or the edges of the pivot and the edge of the hole, aren't quite in the right plane all the way around. So there's a couple ways, again, that they could have remedied that. What I would have done probably is use a D-shaped female pivot and then contoured it to match the frame. And then on the male side, I probably would have used a large countersink and a pivot screw that has more radius, like the body screws do, than the radius of the handle. Then it wouldn't grab your eye and say, hey, that's not quite right, because it'd be so far from the same profile that it doesn't catch in your brain, if that makes any sense at all. It's a minor thing. It's not hurting the function of the knife at all. Other than that, the knife is totally buttoned up. Let's talk about the body screw hardware. And Grayman sort of prides themselves on being very, very heavily built, durable knives. The size of the stop pin would certainly attest to that. And it is stopping in a radius, which gives more surface area of pin in contact with more surface area of blade for long wearing durability. The pivot, or the body screws, are essentially a pivot barrel that goes all the way through both sides of the frame and the backspacer to act as a locating pin, and then the male screws into that barrel. Very Sebenza-like. Just super strong built knife. The pocket clip's a bit of a puzzle. It stops on the lock bar, but it doesn't make it to the lock bar, I think you can see. Even with the knife closed and the lock bar extended, that pocket clip not quite there. I'd probably just take it off and make it a little more, put a little more tension on it. It does go in and out of the pocket beautifully. Not quite as much retention as I like on a 7.5 ounce knife. That's my other complaint about the Tiga, the Grayman Tiga, is its 7.5 ounce weight. Remember guys, 3 5/16 inches of blade, not quite 3/16 thick stock, but 181 thousandths, and almost half a pound. We need to lighten that frame up. Get some milled pockets in there. There are none. It's dead flat, as you can see from the pictures. But I'm not telling you anything new about a Grayman knife to say that it's unrefined, it's too heavy, right? They've always been unrefined. They've always been too heavy. This is the most refined, actually aesthetically pleasing Grayman that they have produced to date. I mean, it really is a handsome knife. Super functional blade design. Grip it any way you want to. I mean, literally any way you want to. Funny hunting knife, but sure is a great looking skinning blade. I really kind of fancy this knife. Let's talk about the pivot though, again a little bit. The Satu and the Dua had a Chris Reeves style bushing pivot, meaning a bushing goes inside the hole in the blade, the pivot goes through the bushing. The frame slabs are tightened down tight against the bushing, leaving just enough clearance for the blade and washers to move freely in that space. And they always, I thought the Grayman pivots always were very easy to work on. They worked very well. On the Tiga, different than the Satu and the Dua, they've decided to go with a standard tension adjustable pivot, which, I don't know, I think it just presents a couple problems. You know, how you orient these screws radially can't really be controlled very well, and I don't know, I just hate to see a company go away from a design that's so precise and sort of guaranteed to be right no matter what the user does to it. But, you know, I don't think a lot of inexperienced users are buying Grayman knives either, so probably not that big a deal. It's sort of every bit of Grayman, and then in some areas that are a little bit, I don't know, off-putting about Grayman knives, it's not as Grayman. So it's just like a Grayman, but better than a Grayman. I'm very, very impressed with the Tiga. Very impressed indeed. It'd be a super nice utility blade if it weighed 3.5 ounces instead of 7.5 ounces. But certainly collection worthy for you hard use tactical guys. Did I mention how cool that checkering is? Man, it sure is. Gorgeous. That's really about all I got to say about this. Pretty sweet, Mike. Pretty sweet, Sue. I enjoyed working on it. Oh, by the way, does it take a nice edge? Well, it's CPS XHP and it's ground kind of thin. So yeah, I guess it does take a pretty wicked little edge. I can never get the right alignment on camera, but it push cuts. Phone book paper, no problem. And it looks pretty good too. While we're talking about the edge, one thing I might improve a little bit if I were the manufacturer, look at this distance from shoulder to cutting edge perpendicular to the arc. Notice that its longest point is at the tip, which gives us the narrowest bevel, and then it's really truncated as we get back to the base of the edge. Distance from shoulder to cutting edge much shorter here, which makes it thicker, which gives us a flare in our edge bevel. I'd like to see that distance stay more consistent. Of course, you'd add another probably be 1/8 of an inch to the height of the blade right there. I don't know if that is if that's a programming issue or if it was just over sharpened at the heel from the factory. But I removed as little material as I could and still cleaned up back there. So that's how it was when it was new. Just one little thought. Other than that, pretty sweet knife, guys. That is all for this one. Time for me to send this one home to its owner, Pat, so he can enjoy it. Grace to you and peace, my friends, from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the Word and this here Grayman Tiga are sharp.